Hello and welcome to Trading Growth and Value Stocks. My name is James Boyd. We welcome all of you here today. My first question to you is, how are you doing today? We got Josh with us, Ocean, John, Thea, Eva, Gary, and many others. Many of you were on X late last night. I know because, well, you were responding and I responded back and had a little fun with many of you. So great to be on the family of X and on that where you can follow Ben and myself on X and all of us instructors there. We post educational content and also announcements as well. Just real quick, as we're getting started, I want to give you a quick reminder, this class is more stock-based, okay? When we talk about trading growth and value stocks, it's going to be, stocks. Options we'll talk about on Thursday or Tuesday or Monday and so on. Friday, we talk about ETFs, okay? So let's go ahead and hop right in. Now, just real quick, as we talk about our examples, the information we talk about here today is provided for general informational purposes only. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. As we found out this last week, it's not all about technicals, okay? You can get macro data, fundamental data that can have a dramatic effect on what happens technically, okay? Now, also remember, when we do paperMoney examples, we use the software application known as the desktop. When we talk about investing involves risk, including loss of principal. And also remember that dividends are not guaranteed. They can be changed, they can be lessened, they can be raised, they can stay the same. That can be, it's not like a coupon payment, right? Or a T-bill or something like that. Those dividends can all be changed based upon how the company is doing overall. Now, remember, today, what I want to do is, today is one of the biggest point movements I've ever seen. Not the biggest percentage, but the biggest point movement. I watched the market to about 2 a.m. this morning, and it just was like one direction, okay? And I want to talk about kind of some of the things we're seeing after the election. And I want to kind of talk about Thea's question, which is, so what now? Well, let's talk about that. I think also with what now, what are kind of some of the areas that the paperMoney portfolio is already in? Was it in some of those areas that went up quite a bit? Or are we frowny face and say, well, I'm not really in anything and I'm not really in the strong areas? Let's double check, okay? So our focus here today is kind of find those pockets of growth and value. And can we find even some setups, even though, for example, some things really look like they went up a ton? The reason why I wore the blue shirt, okay, is because it represents clouds, as many stocks are deep into their extensions, Fibonacci extensions. And so you'll see many of these stocks here today really in the clouds, hence the light blue shirt. Now, just real quick, I want to give us a quick update. If I were to ask you a question, of the four indexes, which two are you watching the most? Now, we had said a couple times here, when we go back to 2016, when President Trump did win before, it was the smaller caps that led. We talked about for the last 2 weeks about being patient on the Russell 2000 and how there was still higher lows being made. And then overall, we talked about, for example, mentioned last night on X, posted about the Russell trading overnight above and eclipsing the 2,300 marker. The interesting thing about today's candle, does anybody notice anything different on today's candle? Okay. You notice anything unusual about today's candle? If you tried to fade the market and say, hey, I'm going to sell upon the open, or I'm going to go short right on the open was the what? It was the low. So if someone went short the market thinking it's too high, I mean, it probably left a tire print, okay, on that person's portfolio. Beep, beep, okay. That was the low, okay? So remember we kind of talked about psychology and this too high stuff in your mind, okay? It's too high for a reason. It hit a high for a reason. If you hit a high, the next highest likelihood is a higher low. Russell smashing its way higher. Now, by the way, that had been something that had been coming for a long time. Now, remember, just because it goes neutral doesn't mean it's still not in a bullish trend, but those neutrality ranges can be some higher lows. Always remember that. Now, NASDAQ. NASDAQ look, the candle's not the size of a broomstick, okay, like the Russell, but the NASDAQ is joining here as well. Now, why do we even care? Well, we want to kind of see, is there broad participation, or is it kind of more of a narrow range? NASDAQ even getting involved too. The moving averages going back to that Christmas tree green color. Many of you like that, okay? And if you look at the Dow Jones, you're going to see 1,500 big ones here today. Not the biggest percentage I've seen, but the biggest points, without a doubt, okay, that I can remember. Now, that also hit a brand new high. Now, this is what I thought was interesting. You're thinking, my gosh, if I had any stocks in the Dow, they probably all went up. Denied. And if we go, for example, to the Dow Jones 30, that is not the case. So you kind of had to be in some of those right pockets. And what were those sectors that really benefited a lot here today and might continue to benefit? What were they? Well, I kind of really felt bad for Nike because there was no air in Nike today. Home Depot, okay, do-yourself project. Not right now, okay? Nobody wanted to do a project, okay? Procter & Gamble, looks like a gamble, right? Coca-Cola, nobody wanted to drink Coca-Cola today. Boeing, still looks like it's grounded. Mickey D's, well, people didn't want the dollar menu when they could actually when they had enough money to buy a steak, okay? So when we look up top, I mean, this is where you want to put your head down and say, really? Goldman Sachs, which we have two different positions on it. Okay. Goldman Sachs, 69 big ones to the upside. JP Morgan, 25. Kitty Cat, 33. Even Intel's in on it, but that's kind of a little bit different. We haven't talked about Intel as much. Bullish. American Express. We know we talked about this because we just talked about it yesterday. Okay. And we talked about Visa. A little bit of a push. Now, here's the thing that I think is kind of interesting. Remember we kind of talked about this RS 5 and 10? Please tell me you remember us talking about that. You remember us talking about that? Remember how we kind of talked about that RS 5? If you see that, the trend is related to RS 5, right? RS stands for relative strength over the last 5 days, relative strength over the last 10 days, and so on. The trend, okay, if we see a trend 3, they're all the way down, on the majority basis, that actually tells us they're above the 10, 30-day moving average. And we said that we have a common denominator in all the trade examples. The price is above the what? What's the common denominator? The price is above the what? Type it in. Now, remember we said the R is 5 and 10? That short-term momentum. That short-term momentum will probably show a hold or a hold. Trade above the high of the low day. It will probably also show a brand new high. 20, 55-day moving average. And it will also probably show a crossover. Doink. 3 brand new ones right at the top. And that will also probably be related to also the moving averages going green again. Now, Goldman Sachs, boy, this has been an explosive day for the first 1 day that it turned. These are fresh, not 5-day-old stale loaf of bread. These are just turned, okay? Now, is that guaranteed that they're going to go up? Is that guaranteed that they're not going to go down? Of course not. It's just showing the state of where it is right now. Okay, I feel so much better about your answers. When I saw that those answers weren't as strong as I thought on Tuesday, it got me a little concerned. Now, when I take a look at, for example, some of the Dow stocks, I want you to realize just because you're invested in something doesn't necessarily mean your portfolio went up a ton. Okay? Now, you can talk about the market to death, but it doesn't really matter about that. It matters what areas are you in. So let's take a quick look at where those sectors are and maybe is the portfolio in some of those spots, okay? Now, remember, we're going to look at that RS 5 and 10 to kind of say, where's the cheese been? Well, the cheese capital has really been in these 4 sectors. Let me list them. Financials, industrials, energy, discretionaries, and technology. Now, is there anything unique about those areas at all? Does that typically tell us that there's fear in the marketplace? or do investors, are they willing to take risk? Well, remember, if you're buying financials, those financial companies are actually lending money back and forth, right, through economic activity, business activity, consumer activity, and so on. If those financials are going up, they think the labor market, consumer confidence, and things like that are probably pretty high. Financials being at those areas, that's not a bad sign economically. Industrials, if you're getting industrials to go up, machinery and so on, you're building something. Is that a bad sign of signs of a business activity growth? No. Energy's even in there. Okay, we'll show that. Discretionaries. Think of discretionaries as things that you don't need. You tell your wife you need it, or your husband, but you might not actually need it. You want it, don't you? Don't play me. I've said the same thing to my spouse. She goes, "You don't need that." Okay, and technology. So when we see these areas that are squirting to the upside, that usually means risk on. Now, interesting thing, when we were going into the election yesterday, the market was only down at the most 2% from the top. Not very much. We saw the Japanese yen down. Don't ever forget it, okay? If that Japanese is down, there's typically risk-taking behavior. People buying assets that have more growth characteristics than income. Okay, fine. You're talking about it. Let's show kind of what the paperMoney portfolio has. Was it in some areas that have some growth? Now, if I look at, let's say, the IRA, what you're going to notice is information technology, discretionary, tech, energy, industrials, communications, which hasn't been bad, real estate, Simon Property Group, communication, T-Mobile, okay? And energy, tech, discretionary, tech, real estate, Simon Property Group, information technology, financials, information technology, and discretionaries. Now, the reason why I do this, okay, by the way, we also have the index as well. Now, the reason why I show this is talk a lot about it. We want to kind of see this. It was the portfolio. How was it postured? Well, man, it was postured really for some bullish moves in the market. Okay. Now, when I pull up the margin account, was it just sitting in utility and staples and healthcare? No, that's not true either. Okay. Consumer discretionaries, materials, consumer discretionaries. That's a product we talk about on Fridays, silver, communication, financials, and a whole bunch of discretionaries. So these portfolios were really kind of more pinned to the upside. Now, I want to kind of take a look and say, are there any other stocks? I mean, could you get in any? Is it like back, gone to the upside, and you feel like, where's the entry? I'm not going to buy this high off the support level. Now, there's JP Morgan. There's Caterpillar. Okay. There's American Express. There's COF, Capital One. There's Chevron, which we talked about for 2 days in a row. Finally got a little squirt to the upside mid-channel. Exxon, its twin cousin with red hair and freckles. What we're going to see is a little push, not bad. It's meaning it's not as elevated. Okay. When you look at, let's say, the sector of, let's say, the energy space, that sector looks like as follows. Not a bad push for energy. Okay. Now, what I want to do in our first trade example, and we know President, one side talked about drill, baby, drill. Okay. And we're kind of wondering, where does that leave U.S. firms in terms of profit making? We already have Chevron, okay? What I want to do is I want to go back just real quick to Exxon, and I want to kind of try to buy something a little closer to support. Is anyone thinking, like James, when I look at a lot of stocks, they look like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Caterpillar, and I feel like I'm buying so high off the support level, I don't know what to do. Does anybody feel like that? Now, the great thing is there's different stocks, right? Some stocks have been more sensitive to today's move, while other stocks might not be as elevated off support. Now, one of the stocks, ExxonMobil, if we just zoom in, again, let's just make it as simple as possible, okay? When we talk about kind of looking for entries, okay, we're looking to see, does the shorter term moving average go from red to green? It has gone green. Did we get a crossover on the moving average? I'm going to put a little arrow number 2. And did the 20-period moving average go green as well? And the answer is yes. Now, does that guarantee it's going to go up? No, it's just showing a setup. This is really like in baseball, where you think it's a strike, and the batter doesn't know if it's going to be a swing and a miss, first base, second, third, grand slam, home run, whatever. But they just try to swing at it to see what it could do. Now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to also be in some areas where we think maybe the economic policies might support the industry group and or sector. Now, why do we care? Well, because if they try to actually, for example, create stimulus within U.S. energy companies, well, that might lead to greater revenue. Maybe. Could it lead to potentially greater earnings? That's the idea. So trade number 1 we're going to do here is we're going to right-click on this. We're going to go to buy custom, and we're going to go with OCO bracket. Now, remember how the last week or so I've been talking about doing one trade in the class? It might be too little. Might be. I want to make sure as a teacher that I'm really giving you more practice to learn faster. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to buy those shares of stock. And let me go to that paperMoney account, XOM. We're going to right-click on the chart. There it is. Right-click. Buy custom. We're going to go, in this case, with OCO bracket. Now, this class is not buy and mold. Okay? This class is not labeled stock collecting. It's trading growth and value. Now, if I took a look at this, what we're going to do is we're going to set a target right at the prior high. Now, we are not saying that's it. That is just a target. The prior high becomes the first possible target. Now, the stop underneath this, we might say, well, James, I'm going to take this 119.6 level, and I'm going to set that stop right underneath 119.6, less 2%, and that's going to be 117.20. Okay? 117.20. Now, for capital's sake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, now, by the way, this is a day like today, the investor might be wishing, I wish I would have never position size. But if it would have gone the opposite direction, you probably would have said, I'm glad I position size. But I know some of you thought that, okay? And I know someone close to where I live, they thought the same thing. Now, what we're going to do in this account is we're going to say, look, at the most, 8,000 capital. And that's going to be about 66 shares. Now, when you look at this, when we say trading, what are you talking about? You talking about intraday? No. You talking about trading intraday to 2-3 days? No. Our time frame is trying to have the sweet spot of that 2 to 3 day forecast to 2 to 3 weeks. Now, do we know it's going to go up to here? Don't know that. But we're kind of thinking maybe in the next 2-3 weeks, could it go up to that prior high? Longer term target, when we go back and really take a look at this, does this have any pattern that we see on the chart that we might want to be made aware of? Well, we kind of see that this looks like we got the cup, right? There's a cup, there's a handle, there's another handle, and there's another fleeg, which Ben Watson teaches, and then we kind of see the rim of the cup with 3 handles for fingers. Now, if we were kind of saying, look, what might be the depth of this? It's about $10. $10 on top of 121 is going to get us to 131. If you said, I want to use a price pattern, not just the prior high, I'm thinking it might try to extend. Well, you might say at 131. Obviously, a lesser probability to get there. And then 2, you might say, well, I'm going for a longer-term, intermediate to long-term target. Okay? We won't, but we're going to kind of change this number from 126 down here. We're going to push it to about 130.5. Now, Bill Barnhoff, what say you? Bill, I want to know from you. Would you just target that? So I just want to ask Bill, okay? Would Bill be thinking in this case, just go for the prior high? Or would maybe Bill be thinking that maybe it actually has a pretty good chance to extend. Bill, thoughts on that? Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a weird cup and handle because it just had multiple handles. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if my fingers, I call my hands like paws. Okay. I'm not sure if my fingers would fit in that handle, but I know what you're saying. Okay. I got 130.5, 117.20. We got about 66 shares of stock. We're going to confirm send. Now, let me ask you a question. Okay. Are there any other stocks in energy that are also showing a continuation pattern? Do, 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 do. Anything? Anything out there? Did any stock in energy, read what's in red here to confirm that's okay, send? Now, what I'm going to do is, as I'm asking that question, I'm going to do a little reconnaissance myself. Don't mind me, okay? I'm going to go to scan real quick. I'm going to look for any stock above 40 bucks, any stock that has, we like to show a million, okay, 1,000, 10,000, 100, there you go. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say scan in the S&P 500, and I'm going to say energy stocks, okay, not with semiconductors. Let me clear that. So the only thing I'm asking for is what stocks are over 40 bucks? That's kind of like the low end. Give me stocks over a million and give me stocks in the energy, okay? This is going to make an immediate watch list. Now, from this, we get 44 stocks back. I don't want to look at 44. I want to maybe say, well, look, give me some stocks that maybe have 2 million. The reason why we care about that is I want to know, is there maybe a greater chance that institutional investors might be in here? Now, we get 32 stocks. Now, if I came in here and kind of said, okay, let's take this, click on the 3 lines, save as a watch list. Okay, so that's really not that bad, right? Stock price, volume, hit me up with those energy stocks, okay? And then just say, look, save to a watch list. Now, we already have the headings on the top of the list. We already have it. And so we're just going to call this 11.6, okay? 11.6, European way to say the date. Save. Where to go? We'll go back to the market watch, go to quotes, and we're going to hit on the drop down. Going to go right to the personal list. Where did it go? 11.6. Okay, now, I want to kind of give you a little in-class quiz. Is there anything on this list that we can look at that might say, James, this looks like of some potential interest? What stocks would you maybe be looking at? Now, remember, my question was really based upon a continuation pattern. Okay? So if we're talking about continuation pattern, we would be probably thinking about a 20 to 55-day high. Okay? So the next question is, what stocks are at a brand new high? BKR is. What is that? Baker Hughes? Okay? Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to slide this over. Now, by the way, you can't say, oh, everything's so high priced. Can't say that. 42 buck, 56, 42, 40 buck, 92 buck. Okay? Can't say that everything's $300. Okay? Now, let me slide this over for a sec, and let's just take a quick peek. Are there any stocks that we might also consider in that space? BKR, pretty big pop. Okay, next one in the list. I'm trying to find one that might be a little closer to support. That one had a big pop, rallied and faded. Dino Sinclair, too much of a downtrend. Next one, EQT. That one is a lot closer to support. And EXE, Expand Energy, that one is also a lot closer to support. But it's also one that's kind of right at that resistance, but it's still closer to support. If I look at the next one, Marathon, too much of a downtrend. And if I look at, for example, the one about 2 or 3 down from there, OKE. Now, many of you kind of talked about some of the trends we're seeing in natural gas, not just crud oil, okay? Now, when you look at a lot of these companies, go to Analyze, okay? and we go to, let's say, where it says fundamentals. Now, many of these companies, they don't just do, let's say, crude oil, okay? They actually kind of do a little bit of everything. Fracking, storage, transporting, marketing of natural gas and natural gas liquids, okay? Now, if we go back to this, what I'm going to do is we're going to kind of look for a setup on this. So notice today what we're trying to do is we're trying to add to some of these energy plays, okay? Now, where was this OKE in the list? This is now proving that not everything we look at is going to be in the top of the list. Now, when I look at OKE, did it have pretty, if we talk about technicals, right? Did we have something that also had a kind of some signs of trend? Yeah. Did it have a gold? Yeah. Did it have a 2055? Yeah. Did it have a cross? Yeah. And so on. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is to kind of take a look at this is what about the fundamentals of it, right? When we go back and kind of take a look at it, are we just buying like kind of maybe a car that has no engine? Okay. Now, if you want to kind of see why fundamentals matter, there's no greater example that I can think of than to look at a stock called SMCI. The fundamentals, okay, which is what we're talking about, fundamental metrics like revenue, earnings, margin. The fundamentals are the oil to the company. If you drop the oil out of the car, it won't take very long for you to realize you don't have any oil. Sadly, I did that on a dirt bike one time. It didn't turn out very well. I knew I was in trouble when I looked down at the exhaust pipe coming off the engine, and it was as hot, well, it was glowing red, which means you're metal on metal. If you think that technical analysis is like the only analysis, this is a perfect example. When they realized that the revenue was in question, historically, present, and in the future, and the oil was leaking out, okay, the stock technically can crash, okay? What we're trying to show is we're looking for companies that have oil, cash flows, revenue, margins, okay? Because if it does, and they're growing over time, and maybe they're even outperforming their peers, that kind of leads us to think that might investors see that potential. Now, go to analyze just real quick. Let's see what we have. 5-year trend of earnings per share, the highest it's really been. And on that last year, a pretty decent year. This is looking at the end of 23. Now, we could also look at quarterly in just a moment. When we look at the dividend, for some of you like dividends, okay, 386. On a yield basis, when we go back and take a look at the drop down, that yield is 3.87. Not bad. That's the yield, but also there's been a little trend there as well. When we talk about free cash flow per share, the highest it's been, okay? When we look at the ROE, 23. ROA, 6. Now, the one thing that we would have to say about this company is it's been pretty consistent, okay? These metrics, when we take a look at these metrics, 33, 40, 25, 19, 32, still pretty positive, and it was still holding pretty well in the years of COVID, okay? You look at the net profit margins, it's at 15. So not bad, okay? Not bad at all, okay? Now, we're going to go back to OKE. What we're going to do is we're going to try to buy this a little bit closer to support. Now, you know, and I'm going to share this with you, okay? What is this showing? Well, the blue line is really showing the 10-period moving average. The yellow line is 3% above the 10-day moving average. Red line, 5% above the 10-day moving average. White line, 7% above the 10-day moving average. Now, let me share this with you, okay? So why do we care? Well, how many of you sometimes are nervous to get in? Now, be honest with me. I close my blinds, so when I ask this question, nobody can see the names that pull up on my screen. How many of you sometimes are scared to get in? Anyone? Okay. You ever feel like as soon as you get in, it goes down? You ever had that? James, I can even show you as soon as I got in. Now, usually that happens because you paused on the actual entries. The stock went up for 3 to 5 days, and on the end of the fifth day, you finally get in, only to get in on the short-term bull flag, and then you endure a pullback. And so you always feel like as soon as I get in, it goes down. And then you start to realize, geez, if I did the opposite of what I did, maybe have done, I would have maybe done okay. So then it goes back to, why is that? Okay? Well, it's because you're delaying the potential entries. You see it, but emotionally you can't commit. Okay? You've already gone through the logical process, but people don't talk to you about the emotion of it. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do in this case is we're going to put a buy order right at the open of today. Now, if we go down just $1, does that mean it's in a bearish trend? No. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to try to say, look, if this stock goes down about $1 tomorrow, I mean, if it can go up $3, it can go down $1. We're going to try to do a buy limit order on this, and we're going to put it right at the open price. What's the open price? 101.07. You got a stop price. What I'm going to do is, where do you see the horizontal area of resistance? Where do you see it? Where do you see the horizontal resistance? What was the old highs? Now, if I just took a little pen there, pen there, pen there, pen there. If I took a ruler or a level and said, where can I connect these dots and where do we see them? It's probably going to be right about $98. Are you okay with that? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take $98, okay, less 2%, 96.04. So I don't know if you picked up what we're doing is we're pretty heavy into technology and discretionaries. The area that we're trying to add to so far is energy. I don't know if you noticed that, okay? GTC. So we got, now, by the way, this is a limit order. What is that saying? Think about, if I said you're at your limit, you're probably not going anymore. Same idea with this order. It's saying this price or better. If you're the buyer, you want that price or lower. We're going to go dated GTC. So a lot of times you're just trying to catch these stocks in a little bit of fluctuation. If we get in there, we're slightly above the yellow line. What is the yellow line? Yellow line represents 3% off the 10-period moving average. We send this out to you again so that you have it. So this is a nice way, if you ever feel like this stock is too high, well, you want to verify that and seeing how far are we off those lines. Now, the point that I want to bring up here is if the 10-period moving average is acting like support, when you get a bound set up like here, like here, like here, the moral of the story is if you get a bounce, it's going to be elevated off the 10-period moving average. If we could try to buy somewhere above the 10 and no more above that, let's say 3% above the 10-period moving average, the entry is about as solid as you could get if you wanted some confirmation. If you buy the stock, let's say above the yellow, it's a little elevated, okay? But if you said, look, where's the upper threshold of like, this is probably not a great short-term entry, it's when the stocks are above the red line. Okay, so let me mark this again. This is 3% above the 10-period moving average. Okay, 10% being the blue line, 5%. Okay, well, if you bought a stock where it's 5% above the 10-day moving average, that just probably tells us we missed the entry. You're probably looking for a little pullback below the yellow line. And this white line, this is where the investor might say, James, I'm not looking to buy. I may be even looking to sell. Why is that? Well, because when things are really, really, really high priced, you might have an absence of buyers. And then all of a sudden, if you have an absence of buyers, if people start selling, it might not take a whole lot for the prices to come down. Does that make sense? Now, when we talked about the stop, it was 96.04. So let me put this on so we're just crystal clear. Now, does everything have to have does everything have to have let me go back to that paper money account. What I'm going to do is bring that back up right in the paper money. Let's put that trade on paper money account. And what we're going to do is if we go back to this chart, right click, what do we say? Got to go back to that line 101.07. Okay. So I'm going to click right around 101.07. Okay. Now, I did this 101.07, limit data GTC, and the stop underneath, when I looked at that number, 96.07. Okay. So there's the number there, data GTC. Now, not going to talk about the number. If we talk about, for example, like how much capital, let's go back to the margin account. Let's say 8,000 at the most. It's going to be about 79 shares of stock. We did that. Confirm send. If we're not setting a target, we're really saying I want to get exposure to the space. Speaking of that, okay? So one of the questions that we had was, hey, what does the market tend to do after the election or historical elections? Now, when we say this, and I show you this, this does not mean that the past is indicative of future, okay? So sometimes the data that we have, the future might not have been even in the historical data yet. Now, on my X page, which, by the way, Ben, put your handle in there as well, okay? Let me go back to a question that was asked. Let me just share this again with you. Let me share this. Now, Thea's asking the question. Share that. Okay. So Thea and everyone, if you want a way to gauge your emotions of, is it, quote, too high? This is a great way to visually see it off a percentage off the shorter term moving average. Okay. Number two, when you go back to my X page, what you're going to now notice is if you scroll down, okay, you're now going to see that if you said, James, could I go back and see, and I shared with you on X. Now, this might blow you away, okay? If someone told me 5 years ago that X is really great, I would have told someone that X or Twitter is a massive waste of time. Now, I stand corrected, okay? And my wife has taught me well on this. James, when you're wrong, you tell me you're wrong, okay? I'm wrong. X is very interesting because you can follow people who are knowledgeable and might be industry professionals, and they share information. I'm not sharing this because it's a recommendation, but it's nice that people share information. Now, that doesn't mean you have to follow the information, but it's at least interesting to see what's out there. Now, this is really for the people, by the people, okay? And what I'm going to do is if you look at this first post here, it talks about going back to 1928, red for Republicans, blue for Democrats, and so on. It shows that what happens after the election. Stocks have done around elections lately, over the next month, over the next 3, the 6, the 1 year, and so on. And then even down the bottom, it says the last 10 elections, okay? So you can say, well, who cares about what happened in 1928? What happened in the last 10? Feel free to look at that. Now, also, I want to make sure if you don't know, feel free to also go down. If you need a little happiness in your life, I try to also share a couple things that I think are a little funny, okay? And if you don't laugh, you're going to laugh. So make sure you scroll down in there and look at that, okay? Now, I want to go back to one of the things we've been talking about this week as we've been talking about volume. Now, does anybody know the stock that I'm referencing when we talk about volume? Now, in this example, I'm going to bring up a technology stock. What stock did we talk about Monday that had volume? What stock did we talk about Tuesday that had volume? What stock can we bring up today that still has volume? Okay, now, if we look at semiconductors for just a moment, okay, the group does not really look that bullish. I mean, let's just be honest, okay? If we're just being honest, we'd probably say the semiconductor group, it's okay. It's not great. When you take a look at, let's say, the IXT, you're going to see the index looks fairly strong, but the NASDAQ looks stronger. than, let's say, the group does of semiconductors, okay? Now, if we looked at semiconductors, a stock like Micron, we're going to do 2 trades in about 4 minutes. Number one trade that kind of we're sitting at the base. Now, the reason why I kind of pull this up is a lot of people say, James, I'm not comfortable with buying stocks at 52-week highs. My joke always back to you is you married your spouse at a 52-week high. There was only one person who told me, Joseph, still remember the name, who said, James, I married my spouse at a 52-week low, and it didn't turn out too well. Now, what I'm going to do is earnings here on December 18th. Okay? Now, we're poking that resistance. And we're kind of wondering, geez, could maybe we start to get above that? Now, does the investor have to buy their whole position at once? Of course not. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this. Let me send that order. We're going to go back to, let's say, Micron here. Okay, going to do 2 trades here. Buckle down. And this also, oh my gosh, what do you notice? A channel. Okay, a channel. And if we look at this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click, buy custom with OCO bracket. When we go back and look at Micron, the old resistance area is right around 126 and change. You might even think a little lower, 123. Fine, have it your way. But if I kind of took something in the middle as far as a target, maybe at 124.75, something in the middle there. Now, I don't care how many channel trades you watch me do. I need you to paper trade in paperMoney, which is saying the same thing. Practice a channel trade. We see the stock breaking inside the old channel. When I say it's breaking inside the old channel, we're just saying 108 should be resistance. That might be the new potential support. Could it go up to the top of the channel? That's the idea. And then if what we're going to do is we're going to try to set a stop underneath today's intraday low. We don't normally set a stop like that, but we're going to kind of set a little tighter stop given today's move. And also, we're still giving it about $6.50 of movement. So trade number 3 here is Micron, okay? Dated GTC. Now, remember, on that stop order, we're saying if we go to that price or less, okay? Now, by the way, if what I'm going to do now, confirm and send, 100 shares of stock, it's going to be too big. Got to go back to the pool balls percent, dollar amount, okay? 8,000, not 80, there it is, 71 shares. Confirm, send, read what's in red, confirm, send. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this, and the one that we're talking about, the space, did anyone watch NVIDIA? Could anyone give me an update on what the volume was on NVIDIA today on the derivatives? Did anybody see that for the 3rd day in a row? Well, you tell me. What did you notice? Okay? Well, so what we're going to do is we got earnings coming up, the 20th. Now, this one we just poked above. Now, we have shares on this. We have some positions on this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to buy a little bit more, maybe about another half position. Now, when I go back and take a look at this, maybe on a weekly chart, we might kind of see a longer term. What type of pattern do you see? Well, we really kind of have that diagonal support. You might even say there's a horizontal resistance right there. You might even say I see a diagonal line, and could have this been a symmetrical triangle or pennant? But if we kind of had to sit here and fight about it, we might say, look, James, it looked like kind of something that had some higher lows and it broke a horizontal. We've had the run up. We had the pullback down to the 10. It only lasted a week. And then this week, doink, back to the upside. What we're going to do to this is we're going to try to add another half position and see if this can't get a little rally into the earnings. Now, this stock has done something different than SMCI. And what I'm going to do is set the stop underneath the moving average. Now, if we did this, it's going to pretty much lower the number of shares we could do if we brought the position size calculator. But for our time's sake, we're just going to probably cut the position to about 40 shares or so, which is probably going to be about right around about a half position. What is that? 135.36. 135.36. Okay? Data GTC. Now, what I want you to do for homework is I want you to kind of think about where is your portfolio? Okay? Where's your portfolio? Where are you in those areas, or are you in those areas of growth? Are there also some stocks that are maybe closer to support that you might see some setups in? Talked about Micron today. We did the example of NVIDIA today. I'd also say keep an eye on, let's say, Netflix, which really had a nice hammer right off the moving averages. Not like anyone was looking, but let's say someone did. We're seeing a nice little push there, and also a nice little push on Amazon today, which had a nice little intraday low right down to the 10-period moving average. So don't just kind of tell me this, everything's so high. That's not true. I probably have 20 more that actually are closer to support, but many of them are kind of showing some nice setups, just like Netflix. Keep an eye on that and continue to practice and look for those opportunities. So we did 4 examples here today. Jax wants to tell you to have a great evening, okay? And with that said, remember with what we discussed, it was done for example illustrative purposes only. Our goal here today was kind of talk about this post-election market and what areas kind of really rocket shipped to the upside and which ones might be closer to support to see a potential entry. So stay tuned for futures tomorrow morning. And thanks to Ben Watson, and thanks to all of you. Hopefully you get a little nap after a late last night, to say the least. But thank you so much, and thanks for your participation. With that said, subscribe to the Trader Talks channel, and have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye.